Well, camper, it's been a while and I have missed you. It's been way too long since I've been out in the green. Unfortunately, I had some stick and brick home repairs that just couldn't be avoided, and it took me a while to get everything all squared away. But now that that is all said and done and everything is fixed, I am back here reconnecting with the green. That's the great thing about being in the green. It doesn't scold you when you don't come around. The green knows you have a lot on your plate, and sometimes getting out there and spending time with her can be a bit of a challenge, but she is always there when you're ready. Being a part of the green is always the best time for me, and at tonight's campfire, I have a doozy of a legend. Have you ever heard of the Moon-Eyed People? The legend goes back as early as the late 18th century. Moon-eyed people were witnessed by many along the great Appalachian region. So if you're looking to do a hike through, camp, or just spend the day in the mountains of the great Appalachian, you may be treading on the same path they did so many years ago. Now, we know the Appalachian is vast, stretching from the state of Maine down to Georgia. So if you're planning on camping, check the area to see what type of land you're on, i.e. private or not private, because the Appalachian Trail does go through a lot of different areas. And it is one that is on my bucket list, and I can't wait to get the chance to experience it for myself. For those who are preparing, make sure you pack appropriately, have enough food and adequate shelter in case you don't make it to the nearest hostel, and of course, have water. The trails can be tricky and some may be missing markers. It's always a good idea to have a check-in time set up with a family member or a friend just in case you get lost. Now, like I said, there are checkpoints along the trail and hostels for you to rest at, and if you're lucky, you may even come upon some trail magic to help you along your way. And please, do not graffiti on any of the trees or rocks or anything that should not be written on. Some checkpoints do have ledgers that you can sign your name on, and that's perfectly fine. It's encouraged and it's appreciated. But the green is not here for you to destroy with your penmanship. Now, with that being said, the true origin of the Moon-Eyed People is still being debated today. Our earliest accounts are from the Great Cherokee Nation that moved into the lower areas of the Appalachian. As they began to settle the area, they came upon a group of people that were later called the Moon-Eyed People. The elders of the Cherokee told how they had later chased these Moon-Eyed People out of the areas. The Cherokee believed that the Moon-Eyed People were to be a white race of people who could not see well during the day, but had superb sight at night, hence the name Moon-Eyed People. Other tribes described the Moon-Eyed People as being short in stature, very white skin, and large moon-shaped or crescent-shaped eyes. And other tribal nations believed them to not actually be white people, as in English or Nordic descent, but they were their own separate race of people who lived in caves due to their sun sensitivity. And this then resulted in their white skin. Now, to err on the side of caution, as we don't have definitive facts, but verbal histories that have been passed down throughout families and generations by both indigenous tribes and white settlers, let's take a look at the possible options. Chief Oconostota was quoted in a 1782 article stating that the Moon-Eyed People were told to him by his forefathers. Chief Oconostota died at the age of 91 in 1783. So when we talk of forefathers, we are going back pretty far. Now the chief stated that they were white men who came from across the great waters. The chief lived in the area we now call Georgia, so it is possible he is referring to the Atlantic Ocean. And who's to say some seafarers from across the pond didn't find their way to this land? It is a possibility. Benjamin Smith Barton, author of The Origin of the Tribes and Nations of America, published in 1797, stated that when the Cherokee arrived in this land, they already found it inhabited by the Moonite people and drove them out of that area. Now, we just discussed that. The Cherokee referred to them as, quote, white people, unquote, due to their skin color. But the Cherokee stated that these white people had axes, hoes, and other metallic utensils that other tribespeople did not have. The Cherokee noted that they could not see well in the sun and lived mostly during the nighttime. Now, like we said, the Cherokee did drive them out. They drove them out of the area of Tennessee and towards the creek that is now called Big Chickamauga. I might be mispronouncing that, so I apologize. Now, it was here that they made a treaty, the Cherokee people with the Moonite people, that the Moonite people would never set foot on the lands that the Cherokee now were claiming for their own. However, the forts that these Moonite people or white people had made were still standing at that time. These structures were described as small circular structures of upright logs with earth covering the tops of them as the roof. Eventually, other tribespeople reported seeing these small white people moving from different parts of the land, going as far east as to North Carolina. Keep in mind, these stories were handed down by many different elders from many different tribes, but their descriptions are the same, and the timelines of when they were seen puts these Moonite people living here way before white colonizer settlers or the Cherokee nations and other tribes as well had arrived. Some theories suggest that they were a race of albinos who, according to some tribespeople, were again driven out of the area of Tennessee and Kentucky, and it was these Moonite people who had built the pre-Columbian ruins. Now, let's contemplate the albinoism theory. Albinism is a condition of no pigmentation on the skin and in the hair. Eyes are reportedly light as well, which results in someone with albinism condition having a weak eyesight. Other than that, a person with albinism is usually just as healthy as the next person. That being said, those afflicted with the genetic trait have faced prejudice and hate from just about every nationality they are born into, unfortunately. Albinism is an inherited condition among the human race. So everybody and anybody, you can carry this gene. It doesn't matter what area of the green you are born in. Unfortunately, people with this condition have faced many challenges in the past, and they're still facing challenges today. In fact, there are even some areas in Africa where those with albinism are in extreme danger, as it is believed that their bones, skin, and other body parts contain magical powers. Those with albinism have been tortured, raped, murdered, and have had their graves robbed by those believing that their bones, again, held magical powers. Even the mothers of babies born with this rare condition also face violence and, unfortunately, face the potential for death. So it is possible that if the Moonite people were a group of people with albinism, they could have originated from any nationality, be it English, Northern, Indigenous, or any other group of humans. Researcher Benjamin Barton began documenting accounts from Welsh explorers in the Panama during the 1700s. He documented that there were people with the same distinct physical characteristics described by the Cherokee of the Moon-eyed people. Now, these people were also very white, very short, and had nocturnal vision. Barton believed that the race of albino people were encountered by a Lionel Wafer. Lionel Wafer was a Welsh explorer in the early 18th century, and he had lived among a group of people called the Kuna people of Panama. Wafer actually stayed with the Kuna people for a while. You see, one day he was burned pretty badly by accident, but the burn was apparently so bad that he could not keep up with the other people in his group. You see, Wafer was actually a pirate's surgeon, and his pirate gang was in Panama at the time of his accident. Now, according to records, his burn was apparently so bad it had exposed bone, and his pirate crew left him to take care of his wounds on his own. And while there, he was taken in by the Kuna people. They had actually used their own herbal medicines. They created a poultice of herbs, and they applied it to his wound for 20 days. After 20 days, his wound had completely healed, and Wafer learned enough about the native people, the Kuna's language, that he was able to speak and understand them. During his stay with the Kuna people, Wafer also encountered the Moon-eyed Kunas. His account describes them as many of the other accounts, that these were short people, men and women. They had milky white skin, and according to Wafer, he described their eyes as crescent-shaped. He noted that during the day, they were very lax, but when the moon shone at night, they are, quote, live and active, unquote. It seems that numerous independent accounts of these moon-eyed people have been reported all along the eastern side of the lower half of the Americas. But even with all these sightings and similar reports, it's still a bit sketchy as to where they originally came from. What we do know is that eventually they died out, but we don't know what the cause was. Could they have been driven out, wiped out by other indigenous tribes, caught some sort of disease that went rampant among their tribe? We just don't know, and we may never know. At the Cherokee County Historical Museum, there are 2 statues. Well, technically 1 statue, as they're connected, but they are of 2 separate beings. They are about 3 feet tall and carved from a block of soapstone. They were found in the early 1840s by a private landowner and kept hidden away until 2015. Now, like I said, that the statues are actually conjoined. So it's one giant piece, but just chiseled out human images, I guess you would say. Their faces are pretty pressed in, with their eyes created in a crescent shape, which leads everybody to believe that these were a creation or a representation of what the Moon-eyed people looked like. Now, the majority of historians believed that this carving was done by some Cherokee tribe, possibly one of the tribes that drove the Moon-eyed people off of their land. However, as with most of these historical facts, there is also a tendency for a small group to believe that things like this were actually UFO in origin, due to the size of the statue and the shape of the eyes and the face. Some are more inclined to believe that this is a representation of aliens that had visited the planet so long ago. Some believe that they are just two figures, and they believe them to be a figure of a man and a woman, and it is just a representation of male and female dynamics. There are another group of people that believe that these two figures actually don't represent people at all, but rivers that came together at an intersection. Unfortunately, nobody can really pinpoint which rivers they're referring to. And the look of the statues, you can't really tell one is a male and one is a female, as no hair is drawn, no facial hair is drawn, no hair on the head, it doesn't even really show any eyes. It's just a very, very basic human shape with a very deep set face, and again, those large crescent eyes. There was even a brief belief that they represented a group of people called the Melungeons. Now, these were descendants of Welsh adventurers who supposedly landed in what is today Alabama in 1170. Unfortunately, the Melungeons were a group of dark-skinned people. Through DNA, it was revealed that the Melungeons were actually the offspring of African males and white, usually Northern or Central European females. So that theory was kind of taken care of because obviously the Moon-eyed people were very white-skinned. So what do you think, camper? Are the Moon-eyed people aliens from another planet? Are they a race of ancient albinos that took up residence before the indigenous tribes had moved in? Were they of maybe European descent, having crossed the Atlantic before anybody realized or had any documentation of it? Regardless, they were here. They lived and they thrived for a very short time. Since this podcast is focused around camping, campfires, ghost stories, and legends, I would love to hear your own personal ghost stories while out camping, or in fact, anywhere. Please feel free to send me your personal camping stories, and they may have the chance of being shared on the podcast. Names can, of course, be omitted or changed as per your request. Let's keep the tradition of campfire ghost stories alive. You can send your experiences via email to campfireghoststories8@gmail.com. That's campfireghoststories, the number 8@gmail.com. And if you'd like to get some information on either upcoming or past episodes, you can always stop by to my Instagram page at Campfire Ghost Stories. Happy camping!